Moving on to the seventh point in the top 10 list is the issue of counseling services that are provided by Christian charities. And one of the things that I'll say right off the top about counseling is that my first recommendation in most cases is to cease using the term counseling in your program brochures, your bulletins, and in communication that you have. For most churches and charities, counseling is not really what they do. And the reason that you need to understand this is that when somebody receives counseling services, their understanding of counseling is that you are providing a professional service, that you have somebody qualified to counsel, that they have a professional education, they take notes, they make diagnosis. Now, some Christian ministries do have professional counselors, either on contract or in employment. However, in most cases, you are not providing professional counseling, and yet by holding yourself out as offering that, that's the standard, the legal standard you're setting. And if somebody is not satisfied with the counseling you're providing, that's the basis upon which they are going to sue. So the more accurate way to portray this is to make sure that when your church, your pastor, even elders provide this, they use a different term than counseling. It's a loaded term. Instead, they should use more descriptive terms. It could be pastoral care, spiritual guidance, shepherding, whatever terminology you want to use, but you should make sure that they understand that they're not receiving professional counseling services. That's an important point to remember. Sources of litigation, certainly clients, members, students, other parties receiving counseling services, whether paid or unpaid. Even the nature of these types of services has changed a lot over the last years. Historically, churches provided religious counseling only, but many of our ministries have expanded to include English as second language, guidance counseling, just basically lifestyle, not lifestyle, but life skills counseling for new Canadians who are trying to adapt to a new culture. So counseling is a much broader ministry than it ever was within the context of Christian ministries. If something goes wrong in counseling, it's usually for one of two reasons. Either the content of the counseling, which may not be appropriate or which somebody may have acted on. But the bigger issue in counseling, and the one that is predominant, is a breach of trust between the counselor and the counselee. And again, as much as we don't like to think about it from a Christian perspective, we have a lot of situations. It's a power relationship in counseling. You have somebody who's recognized as a spiritual authority and somebody else who has a problem. If that relationship is breached, for example, between a minister and a male minister and a female counselee, if there's an affair, if there's a breach of trust, it's not he said, she said. It means that as an organization, you're going to be on the hook because that's a breach of trust. It's never okay in that kind of a relationship. There needs to be very, very strict guidelines. Obviously, it's not something we would condone, but we have to go beyond that to say, what kinds of guidelines do we have to avoid this? What kinds of people are we putting into counseling ministries? Are they emotionally healthy themselves? Are we causing them so much stress we're burning them out? What's their own relationship like? Should they be doing this kind of counseling? Do we have open doors so that there can't be false allegations against a minister that's counseling? That's another good point. So all of these things you need to think about as an organization when you provide these kinds of services. And like I said, in most cases, it's not the content of the counseling, it's a breach of counseling. It could be a breach of trust. It could also be a disclosure of information publicly. And again, it's important that you understand that confidentiality is key in these situations when it's marital counseling, issues of health, depression, all kinds of things. The expectation would be that you don't disclose any of this information. And as the person doing the counseling, the only time that you're really obligated and should disclose it is there certainly is an obligation that if you think this person is in imminent danger of harming themselves or someone else based on what's being disclosed, then you at that point do have a right to disclose it to authorities. As far as sources of coverage, under the Church Protection Plus program, we have a blanket counseling liability rider, which is the vast majority of our clients carry, which covers not only religious counseling, but all these other types of counseling that are provided. In other cases, some insurance companies provide a separate errors and omissions policy. But in any event, if you are doing any guidance, any counseling, any sort of shepherding, this is an important coverage for you to have.